Being a new hunter can be an extremely daunting, frustrating endeavor. Every turn you take leads to more questions and seemingly less answers. If only there were a podcast that could answer those questions, kill those frustrations, and help you become more deadly in the woods. Well, this ain't that podcast. New Hunter Podcast. What's going on, guys? My name's Vince. I'm going to be your host, and welcome to NHP. So I am an adult onset hunter, and I'm on a mission to learn everything that I can about this awesome thing that we call hunting. And as I learn new things, I just want to pass that info on to you guys so that ultimately we can all become more deadly in the woods. So this week I have on the show Kyle Morrow. So Kyle's been a friend of mine for quite a long time. I met him at Total Archery Challenge. He's also the owner of Morr Innovations, which you guys have heard me talk about a lot in the Friends of the Show. I always tell you guys about the wall mount and the grenade pen holder. He's got a lot more than that, guys. So we're going to cover what Morr Innovations has going on. We're also going to touch on drones. We're going to touch on controversy with cell cams. We're going to touch on shed hunting. And we're also going to answer a question, or at least talk through the question of when you've had your kids in the woods multiple times shed hunting and you're not finding anything. Is it okay to get the hooks into them by planting a shed? So we're going to talk through that. So stick around. You guys are really going to enjoy this episode. If you guys do enjoy the show, my one ask of you is to please follow and subscribe wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple or Spotify or whatever of many of the million of different podcast places. Wherever you're listening, do that. It's going to make it easier for you guys to catch up with us week to week when we put out new shows, new content. Make sure you're following us over on Instagram. We have stuff out every day for that as well. So with that, guys, let's get into the interview with Kyle Morrow of Morr Innovations. Yeah, so we've got something in the works, and we're not going to tell you guys what it is, but I know you're really going to like it. But it's a trail camera type product, but just kind of discussing some of the feelings around trail cameras. You, I assume, utilize that technology. I know I started to this year, and truthfully, before this season, I was one of those guys who was, you don't need trail cameras, do it the old fashioned way. It's cheating. You get into the like cell cam and like live video type stuff. And I was a hater, and it's one of those things where, don't knock it till you try it. And now I'm kind of like, I think I need to buy a couple more because it's specific. Like, I feel like you should, maybe you have to qualify. Maybe this is the solution to the entire trail cam debate. You've got to qualify to use trail cams. You've got to either have kids, be like an active father who's like actually involved in their kid's life. Maybe the property has to be X amount of miles from your house. Some kind of qualifier so that all the haters can like be like, well, I guess I can understand that. But I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed getting the pictures, and I enjoyed being able to go and scout and then put a camera up on a piece of property where there were big deer that I can't go to all the time. And I found a lot of benefit in that, in like, there were a lot of people who they kept saying, you put this camera out and you don't have to do any work. You're cheating. There's no work involved. And it's like, hey, idiot, I had to go scout the area to find somewhere to leave my trail camera. Like, I'm not finding deer. And I would say most guys weren't, especially on public, we're not finding deer with a camera. It's not the same as the drone debate where you're going out, some people are upset about, if you scout with a drone, which I don't really think is cool either. But we had to go work and scout and find areas. And then we just are trying to figure out, okay, we found all this sign. Who is it? And I don't know. My opinions change. What's your opinion on trail cams in general?
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 second thoughts on drones. So I had one conversation recently. So the state of Indiana, where I live, they had a survey. They do this after every hunting season to fine tune regulations or new stuff that comes in, and there was a ton of questions on there about drones and thermal, and I was slightly against it, only to the tune of you give someone an inch, they're going to take a mile.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with an old college buddy of mine this week that we keep in touch, and then your podcast with Unbound. It changed my mind a little bit more on that because it's a tool just like using dogs. I forget the gentleman's name that works at Unbound. I just know him as Unbound.
Nick.
Nick, thank you.
Yep.
And it made sense. And I own a drone. I've used one for work. I work in the ag industry. I've had one. I've used one for going on 8 years now, for ag, and it kind of changed my mind a little bit. I know we've got a mutual friend. A couple of years ago, he had a bad shot on a buck, and he found one with just a regular drone
Hmm.
flying around on private. So I'm kind of coming back around to it. The only thing is, it's just how the state can set regulation around it to make sure it doesn't get abused is the big thing. You're always going to have abusers, but that's just the only thing I really worry about it. But I'm slightly coming around to it because of the whole, like, the technology is always pushing the boundaries on ethics and whatnot. So, but that's just my quick little 2 cents on it. But yeah, Nick and Unbound, I think he helped me kind of edge over to the use case of it.
Well,
Um,
it's so darn valuable from a recovery standpoint,
yeah,
and it's unfortunate that you're gonna have that 5% of people, or I I would venture to say 5 or less than 5% that are gonna use it for the wrong reasons. But hey, I am all for, like, before you use a drone, you should look for that deer the old fashioned way. You should be on your hands and knees looking for every speck of blood. But this season, again, a guy both of us know, he had a rough season. He did everything right to get bucks to show up, and they did. And he unfortunately, like, here's the reality of hunting. You got guys who don't pick their bow up until September when they have an October 1 opening day, and they make a bad shot. And it's easy to be like, well, you should be practicing all year round. You didn't do things right. But this guy shoots all year round, shoots a ton. He has done absolutely everything right. And when the moment struck, it happens, man. It sucks. I wish it didn't. He made a bad shot. And, a drone in that situation is the difference between recovering and not recovering. And yeah, Nick, I had the kind of the same thoughts as you until I talked to Nick when he, sometimes that's the good part about conversation. It's something so obvious that I just never thought of you're going to have people that abuse it, but relate it to, say, gun control or any other thing. Do you ban it altogether from the people who are using it for the right reasons because of a few assholes? In any other scenario, I'd say no. I'm not for restrictions on guns just because one idiot goes out and shoots somebody. Like, I'm not going to. I know a hell of a lot of people who aren't going to, so why should we give up our right to that? It's very similar with a drone, and I've seen a recovery happen with a drone that I can promise you that deer would never have been found. Where that thing ended up, it would have never been found without that drone. You wouldn't have found it with dogs. You wouldn't have found it by looking for it. There's absolutely no other way. And at the end of the day, man, you want to recover the damn animal. You worked hard for it and you owe it to the animal, you know? And so I don't know. I'm team drone now. I think they're okay. I want to get one. I've been trying to get my wife to let me buy. Costco's got a DJI Mini 3 Pro or whatever for like 6 months, and every time we go there, I'm like, let's go over to the drone set. She's like, no, what do you need? So I even went the other day. The last time we went, I got my 4-year-old. I was like, hey, Bricks, you need to tell mom you want a drone. And he's like, what's that? I'm like, it's a robot that you fly in the air and you can take videos with it. And obviously every 4-year-old thinks that's cool. I think I told him it was a transformer too. And he was all pumped about it. And he's like, Mom, we need to go look at the drones. And she looks right at me like she knew what I did. Like, how you're using your children now? Like, how desperate are you getting?
Oh, it's
But
hilarious.
but yeah, so back to trail cams. I mean, what's your thought on they're not going, well, I shouldn't say they're not going away because some states are taking them away on public.
Yeah.
What's your thought? Is it similar to the drone situation?
No, I don't have a whole arsenal of trail cameras. I've got, just a handful, and I've used them for several years. Now, this past year, I haven't used it at all. Partly just this past year was very, very busy for us.
Mm-hmm.
We've kids always been involved with sports, but then something that got added on was 4-H.
Yeah.
I was involved in 4-H my whole life. So was my wife, and it was the first year of eligibility for my daughter, and so we show animals, and so we have pigs and sheep and stuff that we show. So with the addition of that, and I'm usually the busiest during the summer for work with travel and stuff. So I just didn't. I know the area extremely well. So as far as like understanding, beds and patterns and how they move, I know that pretty well.
Yeah.
Uh, it would just be for if I could have just placed it for inventory reasons, that
Right.
would have been about it. But I tell you what, cell cameras obviously is a whole different debate within that trail camera debate itself. And I wasn't against it at all, but I was just like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too cheap and I don't want to pay for it. And you're always going to have your few people that abuse it. But I this past year, really over the last 2 years, it's made me realize that I needed to probably start using cell cameras, and I'll tell you why. So recently, I've started to go out west,
Mm-hmm.
mostly North Dakota for hunting. No, I didn't go last year, but the plan is to try and get out there. Maybe not every year, but every other year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a big commitment. We don't need to go into that. We know it's a big stressor on the family back home.
Right.
And so when you do come home and you get your regular whitetail season back home and you hop into that, it's a detriment on your family and your wife, and you miss out on stuff too, of course. um but I think being able to implement a cell camera is going to be helpful for me in the future, just to time when to go out there. Not necessarily like, oh, I had a big buck on camera 10 minutes ago, I'm driving to my property and hunt.
Right.
It's more of the other way, because just through my property or the property I have access to, I know how they move, and knowing that more deer are starting to come through, because what happens is that there's a lot of deer in the area. Well, there used to be until this year, and when you get closer to rut, they get more active and they come around and they hit all the because it's a bunch of patches of woods, small patches of woods, and they'll start bouncing between um, irrigation ditches and stuff in the fields and go to all these different patches. And so they move.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to like get a buck to settle into one little patch of woods and call it home in that particular area. And so it's pretty well ever changing as you go through the year or through the hunting season. And being able to have a cell camera to say like, I haven't had any movement here, then I know that I'm going to be going out there and probably sitting and seeing nothing. And that probably sounds like, well, that's part of, that's kind of a bad move on my part as a hunter, because that's part of hunting. And I understand that. But at the same time, if I can manage home life and hunting better to where when I am hunting, I don't have to worry about home life because I know I'm hunting smartly.
Right.
based on it, then yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I think next year is probably what I'm going to end up doing is purchasing. Not going to have a ton, just a couple. Place in the areas that I know that I need to place them. Because, like I said, I've hunted these pieces. Well, the property down south, I've been hunting it for about 15 years, and then the couple of acres I have behind the house. I've had that for 5 years, and I can pretty well got the lay of the land and how they move. Now things have changed over the years a little bit of how they move through it and where they bed and stuff. Um, but my thoughts on sale cameras have changed a little bit to actually starting to use them.
Yeah. And that was so I feel so I don't know. Again, this my opinion has changed so much on cameras for a million different reasons, but like you bring up prioritizing family and hunting, and you're going to have an endless amount of people who are going to be on the side of when you say I know when to go out, I know if the if for a month period there's not going to be a single deer in, let's say you're hunting like, there's guys that hunt 2 acre patches, there's guys that hunt 10 acre patch, like small. I'm not sure how big yours are, but if you know that there's not going to be deer there, um yeah, like there are people who are hunters first above everything. Then there are guys like you and I who, while I would say behind God and family, hunting is a close third, but those other two are not non-negotiables. I'm not missing a t-ball game to go hunting. I'm not missing Christmas to go hunting. Gosh dang it, I want to kill a buck on Christmas or on Halloween. I'm never missing trick-or-treating to go hunting. No matter how bad, I don't care if I have a camera out and there's a 400-inch whitetail, typical whitetail. Yeah, 400-inch typical, guys. Not even possible. But if it was, I'm not missing those things. So I don't know what, like, people get in the debate of like, well, then you're not a real hunter. If you're using a camera and you're going to time when to go out, I've even gotten to the point now as I've thought through it, like one of the arguments on improvements on cell cams, one of the big questions was, well, what if you get a ding on your cell cam? Maybe you got a whole like trail lined with cell cams and you get a ding that there's one at the end of the thing. Let's just say some magical way you could possibly get out of your house, run down to a stand and just wait for it. Now, would I call that hunting? Probably not. But let's get down to the important part of it. What are you actually trying to do? Now, some guys might say, I'm trying to get the biggest antlers and I only care about antlers. For me personally, and probably you, I want to get meat in the freezer. That's my number one objective. I get so much crap from people for saying, if you want to shoot a spike, shoot a spike. Look, I have zero interest unless you tell me that the deer herd is going to fade away completely and it's absolutely it's an absolute necessity you don't shoot young deer. I'm shooting young deer if they come out in front of me, man, cuz I do want to fill the freezer. I fell into this crap last year where I tried to wait out for a big deer and I passed smaller deer. I'm at this point saying I'm never going to do that again. And I probably will, but if your number one objective is to put meat in the freezer and you've got a way to know, okay, I can cut down the amount of time I'm away from my family. I can go out. I've done everything else right. I know I can make the shot. I know that I can be good under pressure. I know that there's a higher likelihood right now that I'm going to be able to put meat in the freezer, and you use cameras to kind of feed that data and feed that information. I don't really see what's wrong with that. You can argue that it's not pure hunting, and I wouldn't argue that. I think that anything aside from using a stick that you carved for yourself, like we can go down that debate of what technology is acceptable and what's not. But if your only thing is like, I don't want to be away from my family, I want to kill a deer and put meat in the freezer, I think you should be able to use whatever legal means possible. And I, I don't know. I guess if you're out wounding a bunch of deer that you're rushing to the stand for, that's a different argument. But I've so wildly changed my perspective on cameras that it's completely different than what it was a year ago.
Yeah. Hunting is what you make of it, and you can make it as easy or as hard as you want on yourself as much as possible. And before I used to kind of judge people, not gonna lie, for shooting like smaller deer, but I understood why. It wasn't like I hated them for doing it, because you make of your hunt how you want to.
Right.
Um, but just the perspective that I've taken recently is that, just for me, I'm not going to shoot a small buck, and it's not because I hurt my pride or anything like that. But if I'm shooting a small buck, I haven't shot monsters, but I shoot 100 to 130 inch deer, in that range, not routinely, but I have a couple within there, and yeah, they're not monsters. When you're talking about people who hunt in Iowa, but for my area, those are big deer.
Yeah.
And what I've been trying to shoot for is, if I'm the shooting, if guys who are talking about meat and shooting small bucks, like, if you have a bunch of small bucks, yeah, go ahead, go do it. And if you haven't got the bigger buck, or you haven't, like yourself, where you don't have a lot of experience and a lot of deer under your hat with you know it, then do it. Like, I don't care. But for me, where I'm at, like, I I know that there's good deer out there, and so I'm gonna shoot a 3.5 year old or older. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of where I start, is 3.5 year old. Most of the time, that's what they are, because I get too damn excited when I
Right.
see a 3.5 year old. It's could be 100 inches. Like, I still get damn excited about it, so I will shoot it.
Yeah.
But I won't shoot anything smaller. And the only reason why I say that isn't because of an ego thing, but I was going to take does,
Yeah.
because at that point I'm looking, not because of the trophy on the head, but I'm looking for the meat, like you said. And so I'll go out and shoot does. If I got to take 2 does, to equate to a buck or something like that, then I will. That's just me personally, and everyone in their hunting journey is gonna change as you progress through it. But that's just where I'm at. And so, like, this year, I didn't get a buck, but I was actively trying to shoot it, get does too at the same time. Like, if it came in front of me, I was going to take one.
Yeah.
And it was a tough year. The property I hunt down south, like, usually has lots of deer. Population's pretty good, and I seen the lowest numbers I've ever seen down there. And I think there's two reasons. One, there's a farmer who got deposition permits and was taking out a ton of deer, anything that was walking, basically. And then there was a neighbor that I heard, which I didn't know this until I talked to someone else down there, was poaching. And I think it took it on the chin down there in population, because
Yeah.
I literally only seen 4 does. Like, I had hunted down there so much, I had seen every single deer on the two properties. There are two fields right across the road from each other. One's a 35, the other one's an 80. And because I would see the same deer all the time, no matter where I would sit. Because the last 2 years I started, mobile hunting, where before I always had ladder stands,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the same deer every single time I'd go out. I'd seen them, and I'd only seen 4 does, and I was like, I'm not shooting a doe. And so I kind of quit hunting down there. And there's an old gentleman that he lives in the corner of one of the properties, and him and he another very devout Christian, and just a salt of the earth guy. He invites me in for lunch, in between my morning and evening hunts. And he's a hunter himself. I've let him to also hunt the property down there, and then he's got permission on some other neighboring pieces. And so he's retired, an older guy, and so he tells me what's going on down there.
Yeah.
How the deer are moving and all that stuff, and tells me what he hears from the neighbors and whatnot. And so, based on what he was seeing and what I was seeing, I was like, I quit hunting down there. And I've
Yeah.
got 5 acres. I live on 5 acres, and about 3.5 is wooded, and it butts up to some other woods and whatnot. And getting deer to come through during hunting season is pretty tough. And because it's such a small, like narrow strip, it's not a very wide piece of property. It's very narrow and long. And just the way that the other woods and stuff are, deer don't really funnel through there. Which this coming spring, I'm going to be making some improvements to help with that. But yeah, I got lucky enough because there's a lot of deer around me. There's a ton of deer. Like there's that. Just coming home this evening, there was a herd of probably 40 deer in the field next to me, next
Yeah.
property over. So they're there. It's just a matter of getting them to come through my piece of property and getting the chance. And I didn't get a chance until 2 days after Christmas, and it was
Yeah.
literally the first deer I had in front of me while sitting out behind my house here in the back of the property. So um, then I was stoked, and I was even more happy because I didn't even go track it. I kind of seen it fall, and I knew where it was at. It only went like 50 yards or so. But before I even went up to it, I went home and I grabbed the kids, and
Yeah.
they were so stinking excited because
Yeah.
normally when I get a deer, it's down at the property. It's 45, 50 minutes away, and they see it when I come home.
Right.
So this was the first that they were able to actually track it with me, and I kind of said, this is where I shot it. My son, he found the arrow was still sticking out of the ground, full
Awesome.
pass through, and I was like, I know she went this way, and they did the tracking, and man, they were
Yeah.
sprinting and so excited. It was awesome. So it was pretty cool. It was just a doe, but being able to bring the family and especially my kids, almost a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, out there and be able to track deer. And one thing that's always really sensitive. I know we're kind of going on a tangent here from trail cameras, but is letting little kids actually see you field dress a deer. Like
Yeah.
that's a very obviously you got to read your children and know
Yeah.
when it's the right time. And with us being involved in agriculture and animals and whatnot, they've been around a lot more than what your average kid gets to see. And so
Right.
we told him, like, I'm gonna start doing this. This is what you're gonna see. And my son was like, "Oh, I want to see the heart." And he was the one that I would figure would be more squeamish than my daughter. And he's like,
Yeah.
I just want to see the heart. I want to see the heart. He was so fascinated for some reason. And so, yeah, I field dressed the deer, and they watched the whole thing, and I was super proud of them. And because they need to understand, this is the steak that we eat at night. That's venison. This is part of the process. This is what it looks like,
Yeah.
and letting them know, like, from they see them out in the backyard sometimes live on hoof, to shooting them, to dressing them, to seeing them hang up, and knowing the whole process is important.
Yeah.
And they took it very well. I was pretty proud of them.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, those are the moments that you pray for as a father, like, because it's the same with me. I mean, I think it's probably the same with most guys. Like you're hunting far enough away, generally speaking, like even if you're a half hour from home, like you're not really going to run home, get the kids, come, especially if you're on public land. Like you got to get that thing in the freezer. And yeah, what a cool experience to have with your kids, and especially, and we'll get into it later when we get into shed hunting. We want so badly for our kids to love I don't know if you want to call it a sport, a lifestyle, whatever you want to call hunting, but you want them to love that. And it's like beyond just, I don't just want my kids to enjoy the woods and enjoy being outdoors. Like I want them to be hunters. Just due to the fact of like, there's so much more that goes into discipline, responsibility, being a provider, just patience and determination. And you can go on down the line of all the different qualities that you either start with or you learn as a hunter. Those are things that I want to instill in my kids. That's why I want my kids to wrestle as well. Like it's more like, do I really care if they like wrestling? No, but I want them to learn everything that goes into being a wrestler, just the same as I do a hunter. And to be able to share the moment of, hey kids, there's a deer on the ground, go find it. Like that would be so cool. Like, and I'm so glad you got to have that experience with them. And I hope that everybody listening gets to have that experience at some point. I mean, I know my son would just flip out, if you said, "Hey, buddy, I can't find it. Go look for it." Like, how fun would that be?
Yeah.
But
I even had to scold my wife a little bit because she's like, "It's right there." I'm like, "Yeah, let the kids find it."
right, right, yeah,
Like I see it too. Like,
yeah. And to touch back on, I've had this comment thrown at me a few times, and what recently, if you're gonna shoot a young buck, just shoot a doe. If you're just hunting for meat, just shoot a doe. Hey, I'm cool with that idea if you're in a high density area and like you're talking about, where you're hunting, there's 40 of them in a field. Dude, I the public land that I hunt in Iowa primarily until the piece that, thank God, I met a guy and he let me know about this piece of public, but the public that I hunted prior to that, like in the past, what am I going on? This would have been 4 years, so I'm going into 5. In the past 4 years, granted, there could be a lot of me involved in not seeing a lot of deer, but like if I see one deer somewhere in the distance every 4 or 5 hunts, like I'm doing pretty good. Like it's just, I don't know if it's a pressure issue. I know it's not a me issue in the last like year or 2 years as I've kind of learned how to be a little bit better of a woodsman. But I would say, like, what if you don't see does all the time? What if whatever your opportunity hunt, you may only get one shot at a deer, period. That's where I'm like, if it's a young deer and you want to shoot it and you want to get meat, shoot the thing.
yeah,
Like,
it's all situational. It's all
yeah.
situational.
I mean, if you got a farm, you got a deer farm, you're Lee Lakosky, you can probably hold off on the spikes, and I'll understand if I get to come hunt your prime property and you say, hey man, don't shoot anything under 4.5 years old. I'm cool with that in that scenario because those deer are there, and I get it. But if you're in an area, if you're just not, you don't see a lot of deer, and finally in the middle of December, a young spike walks out, I am smoking the thing, But yeah, I don't know, man. I just think it is such a situational thing that so many people get so passionate about, and we tend to forget that we are all different. We have different backgrounds. We are coming from different places. We have different jobs that allow for different amounts of time in the woods. I don't ever plan to gun hunt deer again, but if I could that's the only time I could go, then I'd pick a gun up again. And I don't think that there's really anything wrong with that. I think it is all situational, and it all depends on, what you got going on. So stop hating on people. You don't know you don't know where this other person came from or what's going on in their life. Stop being
Yeah.
a jerk.
Everyone's in their own journey,
Right.
own situation.
Right. So I can't go any further in the episode without acknowledging the fact that I didn't stop and say a prayer, and I was like, man, this is going too good. So let's just stop midway here because that's important to me. So Lord, thank you again for just another great day, another day to wake up and breathe your air and live this life that you just thankfully you sent your son, and we get to live this life of, just your creation and just community. And it was a long day at church today, but ultimately just a great day. I thank you for Kyle and his time. I obviously, unbeknownst to the listeners, but I had to reschedule and move the time around. So I'm thankful Kyle was gracious to me on that. And I thank you for Kyle. I mean, the way we met's kind of weird, just randomly at an archery event. And now he's, one of my good buddies that I talk to really frequently. And I'm just thankful for that. And I never would have found that if, you didn't create such a beautiful landscape for us to go out in the woods and fall in love with archery and everything else. It's just awesome. So I thank you for that. I thank you for Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross for us. And I also want to pray for all the listeners, whoever's listening in. I just want to pray for them that they would get to know you. Maybe you're going to reach some people who have never considered looking into Christianity, or maybe they've been against it, or whatever it may be, or maybe they just got hard questions about, Christianity. Whatever it may be, use this podcast as you see fit. I'm not the most biblically knowledgeable person, but good enough to answer questions if that's what you want, Lord. But use this podcast how you want. Thank you. Be with us for the rest of the show. And we ask all this in Jesus' great name. Amen.
Amen.
So I was gonna go next to, I actually was like, I can't go any further in the show without talking to you about Morr Innovations. And then I was like, oh yeah, the prayer. So I just kind of shifted it there. So, so what's going on with Morr Innovations? Obviously guys, Morr Innovations is our, on our friends of the show. So you hear about them all the time. Most everybody who listens to this at least understands that you are a 3D printing company, and you create all kinds of really useful and cool archery related gear for bow shops at home and things like that. If you guys have watched if you didn't skip over the friends of the show part, then I always hold this thing up because I don't have a bow press. So this is the coolest thing that I own. I got one here at work, up on the table, up in the other part of the house, the office part. Back here, I use that wall mount quiver there. But what's going on with you guys? We got something in the works between you and I that we kind of talked about that I think you guys are really going to like when it does finally come out. But I want you to take an opportunity for people who, the reality is most people are listening in their car right now, and maybe they are like, I'm going to check out, morrinnovations.com. And then they just never do because we get busy. So what are some of the things that you guys are creating, and, why, I guess, what makes them valuable? What is the utility of the things that you guys are making?
Yeah, so just like a lot of people who get into tinkering on their own equipment, you can usually start with arrows. And I'm not going to take this away from AJ at Knights of the Apex, but he says that making your own arrows is the gateway drug to working on all your equipment. And that's how I
Right.
started too. Many years ago, started making my own arrows, and I was doing it on the kitchen table, and I didn't have a 3D printer at the time and whatnot, but we all generally have the same frustrations when you're trying to, whether it's working on your bow, building arrows, etc. So, when I did actually go down the route of purchasing my first 3D printer, I'm like, man, I could just make something to make this process easier. And so one of the first things that I made was some stands. I call them arrow cradles to
Mm-hmm.
hold your arrows vertically while you put on vanes and letting it dry and etc.
Right.
And made that, and then it's like, all right, what else can make this process better? And it went to making a glue stand. So as simple as it sounds, being able to keep your glue upside down so that the glue stays in the tip it saves a tiny little bit of time, but really for me, it kind of saved the frustration of trying to get the glue back in the tip. And
Yeah.
then you always have an air bubble that like
Right.
plops out, glue and stuff. And so I made this little stand that holds your glue upside down. And from there, just progressed. So over time, um, I had an archery shop closed down. I didn't have any other good shops around, and so it was time for me just to finally buy my own press and start working on my own bows. Bought a press, and just like everyone else, you got crap everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could make this or that, little things here and there. And you start to tinker around and you start to come up with things, what I call the aero caddy. So just like you
Mm-hmm.
got a golfer's got a caddy out on the green, I just thought was a neat name for the press. And so what it does is it sits on the side of the press. It goes behind your, like on last chance archery ones. That's pretty much what everyone uses anyways.
Yeah.
Between the fingers and the crank, there's a gap in there. So I filled that gap creatively with with the caddy that you could hold two spools of thread, hold the your pliers, Allen wrenches. It's got like little trays in there if you need to put E-clips or shims or spacers or speed knocks, whatever it is you need to put in there. It'll hold it in a convenient area. And so essentially what it is that I just find ways to uh, clean up the whole process and stay more organized. Um, and honestly, some of the ideas come from people who reach out. Like yourself, you
Yeah.
said, "Hey, here's this trail camera idea," and I had another guy, Jim from Keystone Archery. And I apologize, Jim. I'm a little behind on my design for you, but him and he's like, "Hey, man, I got a great idea for you. I think you could probably sell it. If not, I'll just pay you to make it for me."
Yeah.
And so we're working on something that's probably that's what's starting to happen is I'm starting to venture outside of the arrow building and the bow tinkering space and starting to venture out to a little more of the stuff that hunters or archers in general are going to start using, which is going to help me because although the people who do work on their own equipment and build their own arrows is growing, more people are doing that every year. It seems like
Right.
it's still a pretty small market, and so
Right.
starting to get into a little bit bigger market within the hunting and archery space is kind of where we're going next, but. Yeah, all the little things that we've developed has been someone who's sent me a message. Hey, I have an idea. I'm like, great, let's make it.
I just
And
came up with another one for you. I'll talk to you about it later.
yeah, and or like something else that I sell quite a bit of too is a lot of people have the arrow scales,
Yeah.
and the scale that I had bought, and I noticed other ones they had a little block that you place on the scale, but it was a circle, and so your arrow was like moving around and stuff, and I was like. It'd just be smarter to make a V. And
Yeah.
so I made a big block, an oversized, like bigger block, so it holds the arrow better. And then I put it as a V instead of a half circle in there, so that way the arrow just fits in there.
Yeah.
Just like little things like that that just make the process of tinkering easier, much easier, more organized.
I don't know about anybody else, but I can have a bit of a temper. And if I'm trying to build arrows or work on my bow, if I lose a small little part and I got to go on the floor and look for it, or my string falls on the ground and I got to get underneath the table to grip, whatever it is, those just having a solution for that saves my soul from saying cuss words, from breaking stuff, from snapping an arrow over my knee. Um, but one thing about the stuff that you have made, like it fills all those gaps that the problem's not big enough for me to figure something out, but you've got a solution for those things. And like, I'm for sure, like if there's a situation, for instance, when we were talking about making that pocket quiver, I was tired of getting poked in my nuts with a 200 grain sharp field point. Like I needed something else. It is like, I don't have the ability to do that, but you sent back like the print of it and was like, "Hey, how's this look?" I was like, "That's perfect." And it has been, and I use it all the time. So I'm thankful for guys like you that create things like that. It's just like I said, eliminating those little annoyances that ultimately add up to me wanting to punch a wall. You know?
One thing too is a lot of the stuff. Not I'm lucky enough to where I have a basement. You get in a lot of parts of the world, like people don't have basements; they're on slabs because for whatever reason. And I've been able to set up an area. Now my old house I had prior to this one. Now I've been blessed to be able to build a house and stuff. And um, my my first house, which is like most typical first married couples, it's a small
Yeah.
house and you got to be creative with every inch of that space,
Right.
especially as you start a family and whatnot. And I had taken an old computer like cabinet that had drawers. It was kind of like an armoire, but it was for a computer. And so I bought it used for I don't know, like $50 or whatever, and kind of redid the shelves in there. Added a hook or um, put a rod in there for to hang up hunting clothes and stuff. And I was able. You have this small little area, and I was able to make the best use of it to store and organize all my hunting stuff, so it wasn't all over the place at the house.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff that I made is to help you be more organized to where you don't have crap everywhere. If you are at the kitchen table and you're using my arrow cradle, I've made it intentionally small to where it can tuck up against, like, if you have a table, it sits off to the corner.
Yeah.
Or if you are on a bench, or like some people just have a tool cart that they have like a press on, and then the other side they're working on. It's tidy, and you don't have arrows hanging on there, laying down on the side, hanging off a bench or table or whatever, to where you can hit it and it falls to the ground and you're cussing, and
Right.
you get little kids that could grab at it. And so that's really where a lot of the products have a great use, in addition to just keeping yourself more organized. Because the more organized you are, and I find this too, the more willing you are to actually go down and do the process and actually not put it off. Because you need to work on your bow because your string's stretched and you got to
Right.
retime it or whatever it is, or you got new arrows to cut and make. And a lot of people, like, kind of begrudgingly have to go and do the process, and just whatever makes it easier to get a guy or gal to work on their own stuff, and not not hate the
Yeah.
whole process of doing it.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the stuff stems from. Frustrations of something, whether it's for me or someone, yourself, or like Jim from Keystone, or Jeremy from Antler Up. Like, all those guys have reached out to me, and I've made stuff for them, and then I ended up selling it. And what I do is, they reach out to me and they have the idea, I'll make it for them, send it to them for free. I did that to you, and I'm like,
Right.
I'm gonna sell this, so I'm gonna make money off of that. I'm gonna at least give it to you for free because it was your idea.
Right. Well, and it's a good opportunity, like kind of like what we're going through with the thing we're doing now. Like, the idea is solid, but now you get, we're going to troubleshoot. We're going to make sure everything's good to go. I mean, with that pocket quiver, would you send me 2 or 3 iterations of that before we settled on one? And I think it's just fun too, because it's like, from my perspective, obviously, like, you're my buddy, so it's fun anyway, but it's like, for me, it's fun to be involved in, like, let's see if this thing is really going to save frustration. Is it really going to make something more efficient? Is it going to, yeah, I when you bring up, like, some people don't have the space to work on things, like, if I were to buy a bow press, I don't know where I'd put it. And, I'm not in, like, a tiny house, but I have 2 kids who have every toy that's ever been invented, and it's like, in my garage, like, I have to be efficient with the space and the time that I have. And I mean, something as simple as, like, just the efficiency portion and the, um, just keeping me engaged. If you're pissed off about your arrow keeps rolling off or something, like, you might not finish the job that day. I mean, it's something as stupid as that. Um, but yeah, like I said, there's so many applications of that 3D printer that, how many little tiny small things have you thought about in the woods? And you're like, if we just had this one little thing, and nobody makes it, big companies might not make it because there's no profit margin or whatever it may be. But I mean, even the thing I just thought about that I'll tell you about in a minute, it's already being made. It's super simple, but it would make all the difference in my experience in the woods this past year. If I had this thing, that would have been a huge difference for me. And I guess I'm fortunate because I can reach out to you, but I mean, not to sell you as, like, a custom 3D printer, like, cause I don't know if you do or don't want that, but, like, any experience I've had or other guys have had, like, I have been able to reach out to you and be like, what do you think about this? And if it's got some merit, like, that's what I appreciate about you. You're like, well, let's see if it'll,
Yeah, I mean, you got when you're making a product, you definitely got to think through if it's going to be for specifically 3D printing. Like there's like you could do a ton with a 3D printer, but at the same time, there are some limitations on, and you got to understand what that is. And after using it for a while, it's pretty obvious. It's not
Yeah.
like I'm an expert by any means, but and you have that idea in your head while you're designing it in your software, and then it just makes that process easier when you actually go to put it on a printer to have the quality, at the end of the print. Um, but yeah, it's awesome. I love it. I've actually seen there's been some other companies. Obviously, I'm not the only one that 3D print stuff for hunting and archery.
Yeah.
And man, there's some people that got some big businesses out of it.
Yeah.
Um, and I've actually seen some products that were 3D printed, and a couple of years later, you start to see some of these other manufacturers actually make their injected molded version of it
Right.
because they got the dollars behind them to actually
Right.
do it. So it's cool. I love it. The amount of stuff that I make around my house too, like
Yeah.
to if I got to fix something, like if it's like a piece that I can like redesign and print and to fix an item in the house or to solve a problem that we have, like little things. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I give my wife a hard time because when I first bought it, she's like, "Oh, what are you gonna do with that?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "I
This
have some
stupid waste of
ideas."
money.
Yeah, I was like, I had worked for a buddy and um, running equipment for him for on a farm or whatever, and he paid me for it, and so I just took that money and I bought it, and I was like, don't worry, it didn't come from our normal funds anyway. It's like if it's
Yeah.
a flop, it's a flop, It's in my but I I've grown from one to three, which in the grand scheme of things, like people who are in a 3D printing, like if you're in it for a business, like that's actually like really small, like that's kind of small because there's guys that they'll have, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50
Jeez.
of them. There's some companies out there in the Nerf gun space.
Yeah.
There's you should check it out. It's called Out of Darts, and they have hundreds of 3D printers.
Really.
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. So your creativity is often the limitation when it comes to 3D printing. Because you can hop on and figure out how to do CAD and all that stuff, and watch enough YouTube videos and whatnot, you can figure it out. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool what you could do with it, and then all the
Yeah.
different materials too for different, just like any other like material sciences, right? Trying to use the proper material for the application. In 3D printing is the same thing. So you got a filament, which is your it's a spool of plastic. So you think of like a spool of wire. It's a spool of plastic, and you there?
Yeah. I'll be
Okay,
right
your
back.
your screen.
I I forgot to plug. I used my regular battery instead of the battery plug-in thing. I told you I suck at podcasting. I'm
There you are.
honestly surprised that battery lasted as long as it did. All right, technical difficulties. So we're back at it.
Yeah, so you get all of the different types of filament out there that fit the application. Um, and you got like carbon infused stuff. You've got nylons and a lot of um, like ASA and like other different grades of plastics that are actually used in like the automotive industry and whatnot. And they all have got their own material properties that are best suited for the application. And so knowing those to be able to create the products and make sure that it's going to endure what you put it through, is pretty important. But knowing that you have those options, it's been pretty cool. And 3D printers, man, it's like man, phones of probably 8 years ago, probably yeah, about 6 years ago. It was like it just seemed like that was when in cell phones there was a huge leap, like
Yeah.
iPhones or Samsung, whatever. It was like huge leaps. Now it's kind of small and incremental. Like we're in 3D printing, they're still in the big leaps,
Yeah.
and there's companies that are really pushing the bounds, and not just commercial grade because technically the stuff that printers that I use and the people that, other people use and that make hunting archery stuff. And like I said, out of darts, like those are like consumer, like prosumer type printers.
Yeah.
And there's a whole another level beyond that, that
Jeez.
like there's a company that will actually take uh, carbon fiber, um, um, I'm losing, I can't think of the right term for it, but it's the actual carbon fiber strands. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And it embeds it into the print. And so it'll have carbon fiber strands embedded into the print, and then you'll have your plastic around it. And so like you can't necessarily see the carbon fiber, but when they do strength tests on those products, it is unreal how strong
Yeah.
they are. Like it is to the point where like Formula One cars are using 3D printed
Really?
parts with that technology of the carbon fiber actually being embedded and laid into the product. Yeah, it's insane. Um, and that's a whole nother level. And those printers are crazy expensive in
Yeah.
my eyes, anyways, for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And but yeah, the utility of printers is just it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just it's such a great thing. Like you were even saying, like stuff around the house. Like I know some of my counterparts at Deere, like Deere uses it to kind of, maybe you're not to the point yet of having something cast metal, but you need to figure out size it. Like it's endless. You can do anything with them. And I'm too stupid to figure them out, I'm sure. So I'll just keep, I'll keep having you help me out. But
Yeah. Before we dive into another topic and we're talking about 3D printing, if you ever are like interested in it, what I do is like I almost consider it kind of boring in the 3D printing space, because they've got technology now that 3D prints metal.
really,
Yeah. There is companies. I know there's some big projects going on down in like Texas and stuff where they're 3D printing homes
no kidding.
with concrete. Yeah, they have it. It's an arm that, think of it like a crane arm. It sits in
Yeah.
the center of what the house would be, and then it just kind of goes around in a circle. Not a circle, but in it. You know how a crane, it can go in and out and then
Yep.
rotate in a circle, and so it's able to do a house. It literally like 3D prints with concrete the walls of a house,
That
and
is
it
crazy.
accounts for doors and windows and everything. And they say like the efficiency from a insulation perspective is like really good. Especially down in Texas, obviously with the heat
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's really fascinating. What you don't like 3D, like you say, when you think of 3D printing, like that technology has morphed into these other bits now, and there's companies that are fully, doing housing development projects around 3D printed houses with, it's crazy.
That is nuts. I mean, if you think about, if you can do that, then think about even like smaller scale. Like you could, what are you going to start? Like, what if you start like 3D printing frickin' archery targets, or you know what I mean? Like, gosh, think of all the things that you could do. I wouldn't do like I probably wouldn't trust. Well, I don't know. You could probably 3D print a bow. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the first one to try it, but
If you had, like I said, going back to that 3D printer that inlaid the carbon fiber,
yeah, that's what I'm
like
thinking.
if you could have one that was long enough to do the full profile or the pocket to pocket, length of the
Yeah,
riser, then man, that there could be some potential in there. But if you got to like piece it together, absolutely not. But if you're able to do it as one, if you had one that was big enough, especially one that could inlay the carbon fiber, and
yeah.
yeah, there could be something there.
Well, you can rest assured that my idea I told you about wasn't a bow. So, so just because I want to respect your time, let's hop into our last thing we want to talk about, which was shed hunting. Um, Hopefully you can give some tips and tricks, and then because I have been taking my son out. If you guys have been watching on Instagram, I've been taking my son out and I am shed hunting those same public lands that we were talking about earlier, where there's like maybe 3.5 deer there total. So it's not going well. And one video that kind of, I wouldn't say it put me in my place, but it kind of made me really think was they were saying like you don't shed hunt on the intel you had in the fall. You gotta hunt or you've got to shed hunt where the deer are now. And I'm kind of struggling with that because I have, the first time we went out, I went to an area where I had found buck beds during the season that I knew they were actively using, and I was like, maybe there might be something around there. At the worst case scenario, I can show my son what it looked like, but I am struggling with where the hell these things are and how I can find one. And then that leads to the question that we'll get into towards the end of, is it okay to make things happen for the kid when things aren't going well? So how do you kind of approach, or what's your experience with shed hunting that you could maybe, like we were talking about before the show, I try to do like what's your number one piece of advice for a newer hunter? What's your advice for a new guy who they're still trying to figure out, maybe they haven't even figured out what the hell a buck bed even looks like. It's hard enough during season, but now we're in the postseason. How can we maybe give just a little bit higher percentage chance of finding a shed for a newer guy?
Yeah. So, the reason why I like shedding so much, besides the fun of it and getting the kids outdoors and, putting in the lens of a new hunter and talking to them. When I'm talking about a new hunter, it's someone who's probably already had a season or two out.
Yeah.
You've gone through a lot of the introductions to it. And one of the biggest things is obviously you got to know how they move through a property, where they bed, where the food is, etc. And what has given me success, and this is honest, like I told you, I've been hunting these properties for 15 years.
Yeah.
I didn't really shed hunt until the last probably 4 or 5 years, and uh, took the family. We all went down there and went shed hunting. And this is why would say to newer hunters to do it, is because the intel you can gather from that, like, that deer are there and they're using it in that way at that particular time of year. We all know that deer patterns shift,
Yep.
but I tell you what, the way that they move through the property, being able to see it when all the leaves are down, you don't care about bumping deer because
Right.
you've got a whole year ahead of you for them to
Right.
get back in their process, in their daily routines. So go out there, beat down the entire woods, or the fields, whatever it is, wherever you're at, and don't care about bumping deer, because some people are going to argue against this, but it doesn't matter, because it's that time of year where they're all herded up anyways.
Yeah.
They are not in their little groups like you see them during the summer or during the fall. And get out there, look for the antlers. But more importantly, when you're out there looking for the antlers, you're looking at the trails. You're able to see trails so much easier when you don't have any foliage.
Yeah.
And, everything's brown, nothing's green. It really helps to see. You could see, the deer tracks, because it's typically muddy, because of the time of year. You could see how fresh they are. So, if
Yep.
they moved through there recently. And you're able to find the beds, because before I'd always be like, man, I don't really want to go to the woods, when I was younger, or starting off, and I was like, because I don't want to bump the deer, this and that, because I do it before and blah, blah, blah. But I had found some beds that I never knew about. And a couple of years ago, actually, it was 2 years ago, I started mobile hunting. I had, an XOP stand and sticks and stuff. And I knew where that bed was. I had it marked. And I knew this through shed hunting. I literally snuck in about 30, 40 yards off a bed. And this was my first day hunting for the season.
Yeah.
I would literally watched a buck get up out of the bed, walked right in front of me, and I shot it at 8 yards underneath my tree stand.
Jeez.
I would have never done that if I wouldn't have shed hunted.
Yeah.
because I always had the mindset to like leave everything alone, kind of hunt the perimeters and never move in and this and that. Maybe that's just me not being aggressive enough or being too much of a novice, even to some other people listening to this. But um, going in, shed hunting, being able to see those beds, mark it in on Spartan Forge or whatever app you're using. And so that way, and then you're able to see like good entry and exits for
Right.
yourself, to
Right.
set up a tree stand or a saddle, whatever you're doing. And I did that. I played the wind. I came in, sat up. It was, I think it was right at sundown. Sundown. So you have your 30 minutes of civil light, twilight or civil, whatever that's called. I think it's called civil light. The last 30 minutes of light after sundown, and he came right in, and I got him. Now call it luck, but I wouldn't have done that because I said earlier, maybe we were just talking before the podcast started. Maybe it's not on the actual podcast, but we were talking about the last 2 years I started mobile hunting. Prior to that, I was always ladder stands.
Right.
And I was getting so frustrated because I'd see deer here or there, especially bow hunting. And, listening to a lot of the experts on other podcasts talk about mobile hunting and whatnot, um, completely changed how I hunt.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been able to seize that opportunity otherwise.
Yeah.
And so being able to, like I said, being able to shed hunt, find all those routes, plan your own exits, entries and exits, for yourself, find the deer beds, market, and that's going to pay dividends because if you are able to mobile hunt, if you got a north wind, a south wind, an east wind, whatever it is, how you can get in close to a bed, which way you need to come in, play the wind, etc., and use all those things to your advantage to be able to seize the opportunity the best as possible. And then some set tips. I don't have anything special. You could hear people, get really into the weeds about shed hunting and stuff. Really, I hit the main trails, I hit the beds, I hit field edges and food sources because I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, there was 40 deer in the field,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so what I always do is I make sure I always have binoculars with me. I always bring a set of binoculars because it's going to help me be more efficient.
Right.
Not as much in the woods for obvious reasons, but I'll scan either I walk or I'll scan field edges or I will glass food sources or through like fields. Like here, we don't really have like a lot of buffer strips and stuff here and whatnot. And so usually they're in the middle of a field or in the corner of a field, and you see them out there routinely, just feeding on
Right.
what they could find from in the corn and soy fields. And so I'll use binoculars and I'll glass those just to be more efficient with my time out there. But the only other thing I would have besides that is north facing slopes. So if you got like a ridge or something, or focus on the north facing slopes because the north face,
South.
north facing slope. No, south facing. You're right. Yeah, south facing. Um, the way the sun hits it and warms it up, they're going to be bedding in that area more often. And so that would be that's really my tips. It's pretty simple. Other than that,
Yeah.
it's pure luck, and deer density has a lot to do with it. I don't find a ton every year. I usually find just a couple.
Yeah.
Um, I've been lucky enough to find one pair,
Yeah.
oddly enough. Um, and bring the kids, man. My kids love it. My son, he's getting a little bit better every year. He's getting a little bit more endurance to him to be able to go out and tolerance to not
Right.
finding
Right.
anything. My daughter, she'll hang it with me all day, and but they absolutely love it because it's a treasure hunt to them. They
Right.
find a shed, they light up, man. They love it, and so every year, like I'll ask, farmer friends and stuff, like places that I know that I don't have permission or can't get permission to hunt because they may have some other people hunting it or whatever. But I could shed hunt it because they don't care about it. And
Right.
so I'll do that. I'll ask for permission just for shed hunting, knowing I'll never ever get hunting permission. But it's just more opportunities to be outside with the kids and be able to find some sheds potentially. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, they love it. Like you said, it's a treasure hunt to them. They light up when they see it. And so I know you had that one question about potentially, placing them
Yeah.
to kind of set a seed in them. And I've done it when I think it was during lock. I think it was during 2020 during COVID. Um, Hopefully, I didn't screw up your podcast by saying
No.
that.
No.
I have Apple
Now I'm
stuff
going to
your
get so kind
podcast.
of like fact checker.
Yeah.
There were no
But
lockdowns. You enjoyed your life. It was perfect.
yeah,
What do you
yeah,
mean? Don't remember
yeah.
that.
I had found one, and I was on my way back, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to show the kids. I'm
Yeah.
going to go to a plant. I planted it in the woods behind my house. And I was like, and then I told the kids, I was like, hey, let's go shed hunting, this and that. We go for a walk, and you know, it made it obvious. But man, when they found it, even though I knew that I placed it,
Yeah.
they lit up, and they're just like, ever since then, they'll still even mention it. They're like, "Dad, remember
Yeah.
when we found one right behind the house?" And I'm like, "Yeah, how weird,
Yeah.
you know." But since then, like I only did it the one time, and since then they'll go out with me, and they'll spend, um, depending on the day, they'll spend a couple hours, maybe half a day, and we'll go out and look for them, and it's great. I love it.
Well, I feel like it's like the one hook that they need. Like it's for my particular situation, and what kind of brought the question up was my 4-year-old, he's going to be 5 here in like when this airs, a couple weeks, he'll be 5, and this is the first year where I kind of feel like he's not just tagging along. Now he's like kind of actively trying to find sheds with me. And I mean, any of you guys out there who either have or have had younger kids, like, the attention span, and the kids are very good at, like, what do you want to call it? Kind of like a cost payoff analysis. Like for being 4 years old, like if I drag him out there, like he's still excited about it. He still wants to go, but how many times can he go out and not find anything before he starts saying, you know what? I don't really feel like doing that. Like, it's great to go outside, and yeah, it's great to be with you, Dad, but like this whole shed hunting thing, like we don't ever find. Because what really spurred it was the last time we went out. I was like, what do you think? We gonna find something? And his first comment was, we never do, but we'll still have fun. And that was kind of what kind of got my mind thinking.
You gotta,
What?
you, if you have a little kid, something else that I started doing is you gotta find something else to show them to
Yeah.
pique their interest.
Yeah.
And like one year we were out shed hunting. It scared the crap out of me because I just walked up on it. There was a turkey, and it was on the ground, and it was guarding. It must have been, I don't know when turkeys lay their eggs and whatnot, 'cause I'm not into turkey hunting like you
Yeah.
are. But yeah, I think it was a ground nest or something, and it was like protecting it, and
Yeah.
it jumped out at us. Like it didn't run away. It was a hen, and it jumped out at
Yeah.
us, and it scared us. But it's like after the couple seconds go by, I was like, that was really cool encounter.
Yeah.
Especially for my daughter or whoever was with me at the time, and or like one time we were hunting, and there was like, or I'm sorry, we were shed hunting, and there was this creek, and there was like some down trees. I let my kid go climb
Right.
on the trees that went over the water, and they thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Right.
Like they were exploring, and you just got to find little things to point out to them instead of just looking for sheds. If it's getting close to maybe if you're going out a little bit later and it's mushroom time,
Yeah. Yeah.
find mushrooms too while you're at it. Or if you see something, maybe you have an encounter with an animal they may not otherwise see,
Right.
up close. Just gotta find all those little things and point it out to kind of break up the monotony of the the single sided
Right.
sideness of looking for a shed.
Yeah. And that was kind of the saving grace of the last time we went out is my son now, like, he knows what a rub is. And so as we're, as we're walking in, like we get out of the truck and we start walking around and a deer popped out and it, from what I could see, I wasn't right up on it, but it looked like a buck who had shed, came running out of an area and crossed the street or across the gravel road. So we went to where that buck came from and we found a pretty heavy game trail. And as we're going through that, he's like, "Dad, look, rub. Oh, there's one that," and he starts following these rubs. And so, yeah, he got to see, a deer in person. Then he's following these rubs and stuff. And that's exciting for him, which is cool. Cause like you were saying, maybe you don't frame it as like all we're doing is looking for sheds. Maybe you frame it in a different light of like, we're going to look for sheds, but we're also scouting, and take some of the pressure off the shed part of it. But then, yeah, like I said, I had the thought, like, would it be, I'm all for like teaching my kids tough lessons. I think that I'm 37, and from my experience, your 20-year-olds from, and maybe early 30-year-olds, it depends on them, but like the softness of the participation trophy era and the acceptance era and the entitlement and everything's okay, let me fix this for you era, like we're seeing what that looks like in an adult. And so like at one time or on one side of it, I don't want to plant a shed, have him find it, because it's like, I know you didn't earn it. The kid doesn't know that, but it's like, are you, I at the same time as I want him to learn hard lessons, if he goes, 3, 4, 5 more weeks of like, we go every weekend and we don't find anything, I know my son well enough to know that like next, at some point I'd be like, "Hey buddy, you want to go shed hunting?" And he's gonna be like, "Nah, I'd rather play Ninja Turtles or something like that." And so I'm me personally, I'm wrestling with this idea of, you know, do I put one out there for him to find one time, not every time we go out, but one time, so that he gets that hook. Because once, it's like anything else, like deer hunting sucks horribly until you kill one, and then you're hooked. And then you have that like mental fortitude to like get through all the crappy hunts after that. And, because what's at the end of the tunnel if you just keep pushing forward, and eventually it's going to happen. And it's kind of like, that's my thought with this shed thing, is like, I'm going to let him go, because it's still around that time where maybe half have shed, half haven't. So I'm going to let it go for a little while longer once like they've pretty much all shed. And man, at that point, it's like, I want him to enjoy it. I want him to find something. I want him to be able to run home and tell mom what he found. And it's like, is my pride blocking that? Just, is it more of a me issue? Am I being too hard about it? And that's what I'm wrestling with. And I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like everyone gets a trophy deal and whatnot. My wife and I are on the same page. Like, our kids are in sports and they'll get those, participation trophies or medals or whatever, and it drives us nuts because my wife was an amazing athlete. She was
Yeah.
a four sport athlete in high school, and I wrestled and whatnot, and it we were brought up like kind of the hard nosed way, and like
Right.
if you lost, you lost. And whatnot. And so like I get it. I get that. Tell you what, I know I did it the one time, but I haven't done it since. And if
Would
that is
would
what
you
it
do it
takes,
again? Like, would
I
you do it
would.
again?
I would because they mention it every once in a while, but like there's been a ton of times where we've gone out and haven't found anything. But you know
Yeah.
what? When I asked her, asked my son or my daughter if they wanted to go the next time, yep,
Yeah.
no hesitation, not because
Yeah.
they didn't find anything or whatever. If it takes just having to plant one shed for them to find that, sets the hooks, then me personally, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Um, because I've seen it to where my kids have walked for half a day, find
Yeah.
nothing, and still go out the next weekend.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, it's we said it earlier. It's very situational. It's every kid's different, obviously, and you got to be able to read the kids as well.
Well, and it
You
kind of
know,
goes back to like what, at the end of the day, is it something that's going to enhance, not necessarily enhance, is it something that is going to allow you to spend more time with your kid outdoors? And I think that's the real, as we're talking through it, I think that should be the real objective. Obviously, my kid's not going to get anything unless he earns it, and that's how he's going to be raised. But if planning one shed gets to the point where now my son and I have a special bond, a special thing that we're going to go do together outside rather than, I think I'll just play with my toys at home. I guess that's really the real win. It's not about the shed. It's about, creating that thing that dad and the kid do together and getting the kid excited to spend time together out in the woods. I think that's probably what we're really aiming for. I mean, I am anyway, and I know you are. I'm sure you'll have some hard ass people who are like, you're just going to raise the next Joe Biden, but I think, hook them up. Yeah. I guess hook them up one time, get them hooked. And then, statistically speaking, he's got to find one sometime in the next 6 years, but
yeah.
hey man, I've kept you way, way past what I had promised you. I keep telling all my guests this cause I go way over cause I talk too much. And, so I appreciate you coming on here, man. It's been great to catch up. We have to figure out Total Archery Challenge or whatever we are deciding to do in terms of archery events. We got to figure that part out. So we'll get that on the text on the side instead of on here. But hey, let everybody know where they can find Morr Innovations, where they can find you to follow online and go, guys, I'm telling you, go check out the website because there's 100% going to be at least 2 things on that website that you're going to be like, oh shit, I need that. So go check them out, but let them know where they can find you online.
Yeah, it's just morrinnovations.com. So Morr is Morr. So it's a play on my last name. My last name is Morrow. And so I always thought it was kind of cool, the Morr piece of it. So it's Morr innovations.com. Instagram, same thing, just Morr Innovations. You can find me on there. I'm not, I don't post as often as you do.
I
but
post too much. Way too much.
But yeah, I do post on there occasionally. It's not like I'm coming out with products new every day or anything like that. But sometimes I'll film the process and put some videos up and whatnot in addition to some product stuff. But yeah, find
Right
me
on.
there. Always trying to share share stuff from friends I've came through over the years. Like yourself or some other people, and just kind of sharing the awareness, when they have something that's pretty cool to show. So I always like to share
Yeah.
their stuff. So there'll be periods of time where you see probably more of other people's stuff on my story than my own. But it's just because there's a lot of cool people out there doing some stuff that feel worthy to repost.
Right. Well, heck yeah, man. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. Make sure you follow him at Morr Innovations. Like I said, go check out the website. You guys are going to love it. There's going to be something there where you didn't know you need it, but you do. Worst case scenario, buy one of these damn pen holders. They're awesome. But make sure you follow them. Make sure you're also following us. We're at Antler Feather Co. on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook. And the one thing I'm asking from this show, if you did enjoy it, please share the show. Share it on social media. Share my posts when I put things out. Tell your hunting buddies. Tell your grandma. I don't care. Share the show so we can get this show in front of more new hunters so we can all learn together, because ultimately that is going to make us all more deadly in the woods. So for Kyle and for Vince, we'll catch up with you next week. This is New Hunter Podcast.